Elian. Vous allez bien? C'est bon? Ouais, je crois que... Vous les trouvez jeunes?
Ouais, ça fait toujours un peu bizarre.
Il y a un petit décalage.
Ouais.
Vous étiez un peu plus âgé, non? Vous étiez un peu plus âgé?
Ma promo, ouais, moi j'étais la plus jeune en fait.
Vous étiez la plus jeune, d'accord.
Mais c'est vrai qu'on avait des gens qui avaient 30 ans en plus, qui avaient déjà une autre vie avant.
Oui, oui, c'est encore le cas. Là, en deuxième année de master, on a une étudiante qui a 39 ans. Ouais.
Astrig, est-ce que vous préférez vous mettre là?
Ouais, ok.
Qu'est-ce qui est mieux pour vous?
Peut-être là, parce que c'est un peu bizarre si j'ai une rangée d'ordinateurs devant moi.
Je vais juste vous enlever 2 chaises, comme
Ouais.
ça vous avez un tout petit tournage.
Ah, tu vas bien? Oui. Quoi? Oui, vas-y. Tu poseras des questions et tout. Hein.
Oui. Je peux parler en anglais, pas de problème. Comme,
Astrig, vous voulez parler en français?
Je peux faire anglais, il n'y a pas de souci.
C'est l'un à l'autre, oui. Hein? Ça pose un problème pour ceux qui ne parlent pas bien anglais?
English speaking only. Is it okay for everyone? Yes? C1 level in English for everyone? Okay. So, welcome to all of you. Today we'll have a meeting with 4 alumni from the Joint Master. We have Astrig Agopian here, and then on the screen we have Luca Minisini. I'll do it again. So welcome to this masterclass with 4 alumni from the Joint Master. We have Astrig Agopian here with us in Paris. In the Alpes Françaises, we have Luca Minisini. Can you raise your hand? Yeah, that's him. And Sira Thierj. You're in Brussels, right? And Elian Peltier in Dakar, West African correspondent from the New York Times. Maybe we could start with you, Astrig. She'll introduce herself and her last months at Sciences Po, and then we'll switch to the others, and then we'll open for questions. Okay? Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, so I'm Astrig, I'm French-Armenian. I graduated in 2020, so I was the first COVID promo, which is important for the rest, that's why I'm mentioning it. So it means that the last months of our M2, we were kind of on and off, and then we were actually off campus, and we graduated not really knowing what was gonna come next for us, because all the contests and all those things that you have at the end of the year, everything was different, nobody really knew what to do. But in the end, I still had applied to do CDD d'été for TV, because I'm mainly doing broadcast media. And I started working in the summer at LCI as GRE, so VJ. It was covering COVID and consequences of COVID and only COVID, and I didn't enjoy it, if I'm totally honest. But after that, I also was selected to do the CDD d'été of France Télé, which normally would have meant I would have to choose between one or the other, but because of COVID, the France Télé ones were happening in the fall, so I was lucky in a way that I got to do both CDD. So after LCI, from October until November, I did that CDD at France 3 Picardie. I was rédactrice and VJ, so doing kind of everything. It was actually a really great experience because I got to do a lot of things on the ground. But again, it was COVID, so we were basically covering COVID for 2 months. And so as I mentioned, I'm French and Armenian. And in September 2020, a war started between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the region of Nagorno-Karabakh. And even though I really did not have planned to go there or become a foreign correspondent or a war correspondent, it kind of just happened because I just wanted to go. And so what I did was before going, I contacted all my former professors, a lot of alumni. I actually contacted Marie even at the time. We didn't know I was studying in Sciences Po, but still she helped me a lot. And so I kind of prepared by, gathering many contacts of media that I could pitch to and kind of planning also just life and how is it when you become a foreign correspondent as a freelancer. And then I moved there, I started working, and so for the first month it was really hard. Nobody was interested because the war had ended, so they were like, yeah, fine, that's it. And then suddenly there was a coup militaire, kind of attempted coup. It didn't really happen, but anyway, everybody called me back. In one day, everybody called me back. And suddenly I started working. I became the video correspondent for AFP. I started doing cold pitches, and I wrote in La Croix, in The Guardian. I was doing stuff for Europe 1, just a lot of work very suddenly. And after that, I decided to move back to France after a year because I was just really tired. I started freelancing for France Info, for the show Vrai ou Fake, maybe you know, it's like fact-checking on TV. And just also worked for fact-checking at AFP. And after that, a former alumni, so really guys, stay in touch, all of you after. Clara Marchot, who became the correspondent in Ukraine at the same time that I moved to Armenia. She was like, hey, do you want to come here? It was before the invasion. Do you want to come here? I really would like to do a video piece. I don't know how to do video. You do that, and you cover former Soviet states, so it makes sense. I said, okay, I went there. We did great work. I came back to France, invasion. So after that, again, I didn't really plan on being a war correspondent or anything, but it kept on happening. So I went back, and now basically it's been a year that I'm spending half of my time in Ukraine and half of my time here. And I started freelancing for many, many other media, just because it happens when you're on the ground as well. You just meet people, they want you to replace them for a week or things like that. And I also go back a lot to Armenia because it's not really over and there's a lot of news going on there. So that's me. Did I speak for too long, or is it okay? No. Yeah? Okay. And yeah, that's it.
Can we switch to Sira, maybe?
Sure, it's Sira, yeah. So I started, I was in the promo, we finished in 2019. So luckily just before COVID. And can you hear me well, by the way, okay, great. And before I graduated, I actually started working for Arte already in Strasbourg I think in like March or April 2019. And I was hosting and presenting a European program ahead of the European elections, something I really enjoyed. But yeah, I didn't want to be a presenter and I wanted to be abroad. So I didn't stay with Arte. I went to Madagascar for a couple of months with a reporting fellowship and worked for mainly German and German international media from there. And then I applied for a job, which I currently still do with the BBC in Brussels as a Europe producer. I guess for those who don't know what a producer is, it's quite different in every country and in every organization as well. I had no idea when I started myself either. Producers basically, so in the BBC, we produce TV, radio, and online pieces. The producer is basically in charge of the project. So we usually are the ones who find the story, who pitch the stories, who do the research and figure out who is it that we want to talk to, what's the angle we want to choose, and set up the whole plan. In Europe, it's often relatively straightforward. If it's a simple story, I don't know, in Portugal, it's quite easy. But we also went to Ukraine a couple of times, so that takes a bit more effort to plan those kind of stories and trips. And yeah, so my job now, I've been doing it for 3 years. It involves tons of traveling. It's pretty diverse. There's a different story every day. Luckily, I don't spend too much time in Brussels and not too much time covering European institutions, which I don't enjoy. And yeah, I got the opportunity to travel also outside of Europe with the BBC. I spent a couple of months in Kenya, in the Nairobi bureau covering Eastern Africa. And yeah, every day looks different. It's sometimes we work on documentaries, sometimes, yeah, we do radio, we do TV. And yeah, I started during COVID, so that made things a bit tricky as well. Like the first 9 months or so were a bit strange. And then things picked up quite quickly and were, yeah, quite busy over the last 2 years or so. But yeah, I guess if you guys have questions later on, I can talk more about that.
Elian, maybe can we hear you?
Mm-hmm. Hi everyone, my name is Elian. I'm French. I started the J School in 2014. I graduated in 2017. I took a gap year and I joined the New York Times in Paris as a local reporter. I did 2 years with them there. Then I moved to London, also with the New York Times. And since last year, I've been based out of Dakar in Senegal, covering West Africa. We're two of us, both based in Dakar, working with a network of stringers. And yeah, I just want to leave time for questions, but I guess my days look like, well, there's also a lot of traveling. I was in Nigeria for the presidential election last week, covering basically, I do cover news, I do feature stories, pretty much everything like political stories, security, environment. Yeah, that's much good.
Luca?
Hello, I'm Lucas. I'm a reporter for Le Monde and its weekly magazine, Le M. So I studied in EDJ from 2015, 2017. And then right away from like, even starting from school, I was already freelancing a bit. So back then I was working for Society magazine, this bi-weekly French independent magazine. So I was like doing that and class, juggling between that and classes at EDJ. And then right away doing that a bit more like full-time in Society magazine, starting like 2017. But since like it was a freelance job, it was pretty complicated to make ends meet. So I was like doing a lot of stuff at the same time, like brand content, documentary, also a bit, but with one that I co-wrote, and I was getting a bit tired of that, of all that, like freelancing in writing press, because I mean, yeah, just to pay rent, it was a big struggle. So I just during the first lockdown, I started pitching for Le Monde and its magazine, and it worked out pretty well. So I kept doing that, and it was a bit better paid than over like media in France. So that took me to a permanent, like a first short time contract, like a CDD, which I did starting October 2021. And then I did that for 18 months, and just now in April I'm starting a full-time position at the weekly at the magazine. So yeah, that was my path since EDJ.
Thank you to all. I have a question for you that's very basic, but just like, do you have your own material? How do you do, like, what are the first steps when you're really interested in video and then you're video freelancing? Like, how does it actually works on the ground?
When I started with the CDD, I did not own my own equipment yet, because obviously I would be, they gave me a camera and everything that was needed, and I kind of started learning how to use all that. But at the same time, I already wanted to buy my own things, even though I didn't know yet I was going to move and work abroad. So I saved up money and I bought myself my own equipment, my own microphone. The most basic things. I didn't right away, have the best things, but just enough to do something that could be shown on TV, basically. So basic microphone, a small tripod, a camera, one lens, that's it. And but then later on, one thing that is super important, though, if you want to go work in hostile environments, as we call them, is that as a freelancer, it's going to be hard, but you can also apply to fellowships. You have to have a HIFAT training, and you really have to find yourself like the PPE equipment, as in like a life vest, helmet, and all that. You can ask RSF. I mean, there are ways as a freelancer to not have to pay for it, but that's all the things that you should definitely think about, because it's really hard to just ask a newsroom to lend you everything if it's the first time you're going somewhere. It's just not going to happen. Once you have a working relationship, it's different. But at the very beginning, yeah, you kind of have to buy or, you know, kind of organize everything yourself.
Maybe one of the other three could answer the question if it makes sense for you.
Yeah, so I'm a video journalist as well. Focus on video, and during Sciences Po, actually I got myself my own equipment, I think in the first year. Like Astrig, the most basic stuff that I could find quite cheap. But just because I think if you want to get into video specifically, I mean, it's the same for writing, but with video you need the equipment. You need to just get your clips and your portfolio together to then apply for jobs. And even if you go freelance, to send them some examples of what you can do and what you can film. So I got my first equipment, I think, in the first year of Elian. I actually worked with it until about 2 years ago. So I even used it at the beginning when I joined the BBC. And yeah, it's very useful to have that, because during internships, for example, I did one internship in DC with Deutsche Welle, and they didn't have a camera kit for me. But since I arrived with my own stuff saying, hey, I can shoot, I can film, they sent me to New Mexico on my second day of my internship to film like a short documentary. And like I ended up traveling for like 6 weeks with my own kit. And just because I had my own kit, that was the only way I could do that. And that allowed me to get, well, a lot of clips that I then used to get my job. So I think if you can afford it, if you can, you know, buy something cheap secondhand, like I said, mine was really, really cheap. I had the absolute basics. It's definitely worth it. And at the beginning, to be fair, at the beginning with the BBC as well, before they gave me all the expensive stuff, I had to kind of prove to them that I can actually shoot. So at the beginning, I used my own kit a lot, just to kind of say, hey, I can do this. Please give me the good stuff, which made it much easier to convince them. Yeah.
Luca or Elian, does the equipment question make sense for you?
I mostly have a notepad. No, I have a mic because we do quite a lot of audio now. So if I'm on the ground and our audio teams working for the Daily or another podcast are interested in some audio, I can record that. And for the rest, mostly with my phone, honestly, just vertical videos, either for our social media platforms or for short video formats that we put on our websites, an iPhone 12 or 13 provided by the New York Times works. So that's my equipment mostly.
Yeah, no, at Le Monde, we don't do a lot of multimedia projects, but what often happens is like, so since I only work on long form features, sometimes usually they translate it into a podcast, and there is L'Heure du Monde, which is the daily podcast of Le Monde. And so it happens pretty often that when I go on a report abroad, like I take a test cam with me and I record some ambient sounds, or I record myself on the trip to describe how it is, and then it helps sort of add some more elements to the podcast and make it a bit more lively, and you can feel the report and the underground reporting in it. So, but usually no, yeah, it's just a test cam and then a notebook and a pen and my phone that I use, of course, for a bit of pictures that helps me then for descriptions or these elements. But it's pretty low tech equipment.
I have a question
for Sira and maybe Astrig, because you both talked about reporting fellowships. Could you please explain what it is and how it works exactly?
So, I mean, I'll talk about. I'm going back to Armenia with a fellowship, so I can talk about that one particularly. When you're a freelancer, you need money, right, to travel, and it's hard to get it. So one very good option is just applying to a bunch of fellowships which exist. You have just reporting fellowship, photography fellowships, very different things, and some of them are for young professionals or people who just graduated, so that's your crowd. And you just have to come to them with a pitch, like a project that you want to do. Then, of course, it's different depending on what you apply to exactly. But for example, I'm going to go to Armenia with the Emerging Lands Fellowship, which is an American fellowship for young photographers who are just starting out and are focusing on human rights violations and issues. So I just, applied to them with a pitch, a project. Of course, the fact that I had already reported in the region was helping me get some credibility, but also I did apply as a young journalist. You pitch them everything. You have to give a budget to show that, you're kind of organized and you have a vision of what you're going to do. And then if you're lucky enough to get it, which I did for this one, well, they pay you to go there and do your reporting thing. And that's super useful, not only to do one project, but for, you build your portfolio, and then when you apply for jobs, that's definitely going to help you. And it's also kind of prestigious and nice to be able to write in your resume that you got this fellowship. So later on, when you apply, it always helps.
And Sira?
Yeah, so I had a bunch of fellowships actually throughout my studies, and like Astrid just said, it's super useful. Like when I went to Madagascar, I got a bunch of cash and no strings attached, and I just went and I found the stories I wanted to do and I sold them to whoever wanted them, and it was great because again that just gives you the opportunity to report something and to then show to future clients or possible employers that you've done that, and you can't just get like fellowships for reporting trips. You can also get a fellowship to get your HIPAA training done, for example, or you get a fellowship to get your internship paid for, or a fellowship to. And also there, apart from just the fellowships, there are also prizes. So if you do a good report, and if you're freelance, then it makes sense to hand in your stuff for prizes and awards, and then you get some cash out of it as well, which then will help you to do the next story. So there are some international ones, but there are also, and they're often easier to get, I guess, they're national ones as well. So quite a few of the fellowships that I had were from Germany. So just see what your country offers for students from wherever you're from, because they're often a bit less competitive and a bit easier to get at the beginning. And at the end, all you want is the money to go and do your story. So it doesn't really matter. I don't know if the other two have experience with this as well.
No fellowship.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
But also loads of fellowships for women, huh? So like
I guess I was just wondering for like how did you present and introduce yourself to like these companies that were outside of France? Because it's not like applying to a job that's in France and you can go and actually meet with them. Like how did you introduce yourself to like foreign newsrooms, I guess, if that makes sense?
That's the New York Times. Yeah, for example, like just how did you like talk with them?
The first step in Paris.
Yeah.
Is this what was? Yeah, I started in Paris. So when I was first year, when I was a first year student, I reached out to the Paris bureau looking for an internship initially for the summer between my first year and my second year. And they were only accepting long internships. So I decided to take a gap year to do this internship. But so my entry point was really the Paris bureau. And then obviously I got connected to the other newsrooms, the other foreign bureaus, the bigger newsroom in London, but I really started in Paris. So that was my way in. And there are quite a lot of, I'm sure some of those journalists are your professors, but there's quite a lot of international news outlets in Paris that I would recommend reaching out if that's what you're interested in doing.
Could you give examples?
Well, all of them, Reuters, Bloomberg, AP, AFP, who else? The Guardian has someone, the BBC has a big presence, CNN has a big presence, the FT has a big presence, who else? And that's just for the English-speaking news outlets, I guess. But Al Jazeera has a big presence. Washington Post has a correspondent, I think, or maybe not anymore.
Yeah, I think. No, they do.
Did you? Okay. Oh yeah, he's a Sciences Po guy too, actually. Not just but yeah, Deutsche Welle in English. Well, France 24, of course. Yeah, can go on and on.
I think that's kind of a follow-up question, but is it to you relevant to
have an internship, even of 2 weeks, with one correspondent? For example, I was super interested in working with NPR. I know they have one woman, one journalist working in Paris, but I don't know how useful it can be to just follow one correspondent who is working on his own, and there is not necessarily a newsroom with them. And do you think that it helps, or is kind of useless?
Can I go ahead? I've never done that personally, just interning with one person, but I don't think it's useless because it's also kind of the reality that you're going to face in most cases, or especially if you happen to work abroad, is you're going to be alone most of the time. So I think just watching her work can be super useful, and then it also means then you have a contact in that newsroom through that person. So I mean, I've never done it, but I think it can be really useful actually.
If I can add something, I would definitely recommend it, but I would try to make sure that this person is your champion in that newsroom and connects you to other journalists within that news organization. So NPR actually is a great example. Or if I take the example of the New York Times, when I was an intern, I tried to work with other sections of the paper. So I was working, I'm now part of the international desk, but I tried to write for the culture desk because they were taking freelancers. I tried to work with the sports desk. And so if you can get the person you're working with, the NPR correspondent, for instance, to put you in touch with other people, especially DC-based journalists, because I guess the bulk of the newsroom is there, if you manage to be in touch with them when someone comes to Paris, then you can be their fixer, you can be the assistant, you can pitch stories to them too. So that's one level. And then next level, if you have a good relationship with them, put you in touch directly with editors, because at the end of the day, those are the ones who commission stories. So.
Thank you. So I want to just expand the question a little bit. How would you approach a correspondent of a publication if they're based in Paris working alone? Probably they're pretty busy. Like it could be a little bit off-putting to say, hey, I'm looking for an internship, obviously, but you want to meet them. Also, you want to maybe be around them, learn from them. How would you approach to them without being too annoying? That's the question.
Did you hear the question? How can you?
How do you approach to a correspondent of a publication who's probably based in Paris, working alone, like let's say NPR correspondent, someone mentioned working alone in Paris, and you want to reach out to them just for the maybe ask for opportunity to have an internship or connect, maybe they can connect you to someone, but what's the proper way of approaching them? Because now that you're working, basically, how would you like to be approached? Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Without being annoying.
Yeah, without being annoying,
Actually, I feel like, in my position now, I love when younger journalists reach out. When I was in your position, well, actually, it's the same thing. No, okay, if we take English-speaking, like American or British news outlets, they don't always know exactly what France is about, what Paris is about, and so they want those cool stories that you folks can see. So, I don't know, the underground party scene in Paris, so swimming in the Seine. I'm giving very cliche stories here, but you have eyes and feet on the ground that they may, and feet on the ground that they may not have, and so you can have ideas. that they would be interested in exploring. I wouldn't pitch those story ideas right away, but I would ask them if they're free for coffee and saying that you are looking for guidance in starting your career. And then once you have coffee with them, you can ask about internship opportunities and stuff like that. What's tricky, I had it, for instance, with someone this morning who asked if the New York Times in Dakar was taking interns, and unfortunately we don't. And I'm very happy to follow up with this student, but like now that I've said no, like if she wants to have like a virtual coffee, like maybe she can ask and I'll say yes, but I'm kind of like, I've closed the door already. Well, if you keep your questions or your message broad enough and kind of like agitate a little carrot saying like, hey, you know, I have plenty of story ideas. I would love to get your guidance on how to pitch them. You know, you don't have to say that it's for them. Then maybe you can get them hooked. That's how I would do it. It's tricky. It's so tricky.
If I can add, I think what I've learned over the last couple of years is that generally everyone is really, really open and willing to help. So whenever there's someone that you would really like to have a chat with, don't be shy. Just send a nice message. Everyone normally feels quite, you know, it feels nice when someone reaches out and says, hey, I love your work. Can we have a chat? So people are generally really, really open to help because, you know, we all started as a student sometime, and I don't think you ever not get something by being, you know, like being annoying or sending an email or, you know, following up again or something. Like it's only you start with a no, but you can only turn it into a yes, right? So it's always worth asking people, and normally people are really, really open to help.
It's a question for Elian. So I'd like to know what it's like to be West Africa correspondent for the New York Times. I mean, covering such a large region, do you travel a lot? What does it look like on a daily basis?
What it's like freaking out all the time because you feel like you're missing out on all the stories. And you can basically cover, I guess, 5% of what's going on. And so you just have to pick what you think is the most important or the most interesting to you too. It's a weird, I moved right when the war in Ukraine started. So it's been an interesting learning experience to see how should I put this, Western centered and Western obsessed are the news organization I work for, but so many others are. So it's hard to just, even as a staff journalist, it's hard to get stories, published or accepted just because there's so much coming out of elsewhere, and mostly Ukraine. So, when you fight to pitch stories on the Nigerian elections, which were the largest elections ever organized in Africa, and it's the largest country on the continent. And at the same time, you see your colleagues in Ukraine doing stories about Ukrainians going on a ski trip and Ukrainians doing yoga. You're just like, you feel like sometimes it's a little unfair. But to take it back to what it's like, I would say half news, half enterprise stories. More news now. I just have, again, Nigeria and in mind because I'm just coming back from there. But last year, there was not one big story coming out of West Africa. I guess in the past you could think, and I'm glad it was not like that, but you could think Boko Haram or Ebola or those very tragic stories that captured everyone's minds. And at least we don't have that last year. So it also gave me space to explore the stories I wanted to do. So stories about culture, society, social issues, sports. So a bit of everything. I also tried to use my first year to travel as much as I could, just because I have 20 plus countries to keep an eye on. And so, and sometimes it was a mix of news and enterprise, as in there's something happening in, say, Mali. And so I use that opportunity to go to Mali and do an investigation there while I'm there. So again, it makes, I don't know if that helps.
But how much did you know of the region before going there? Since you're covering more than 20 countries, you cannot be a specialist. I mean, how have you dealt with this? Have you dealt with this? I don't know. Just
when you don't know a country, how do you deal with it?
Yeah. So I was covering breaking news when I was in London before, and because we had a pretty small team here, I was quite often covering for my colleague when she was on a reporting trip. So doing lots of like news in Francophone African countries, which stemmed from my interest in the region. When I was at Sira, I was studying international security, so looking a lot into the Sahel and so on. But apart from that, yeah, I must admit that I didn't have a lot of professional experience in the region. I had traveled there, but not for professional reasons. So it's tricky because, like, for instance, Senegal, like I'm based in Senegal, right? It's a pretty small country. So for the New York Times, it may not be a story in itself. So sometimes I have to think about regional trends. But when you go to a country, you still have to learn about or like catch up on the latest political developments, social developments, and so on. So there's this always balance to find between finding the big picture, but also making sure that you are knowledgeable enough about the country, just for your own knowledge, but also out of respect for your sources and so on. So lots of readings, a lot of like calls, like pre-reporting, doing lots of pre-reporting, which is a little trickier here than it is in Europe because, you know, people would rather meet you. So when you reach out to them, they're just like, yeah, just let me know when you're in town and we'll meet. But if you only have 3 or 4 days, you know, you can't just schedule, you have to schedule a little earlier. But that's not how people do it here most of the time. So yeah, just lots of readings, also relying on you know, local journalists. And I guess, you know, we can talk about that too, but there's this whole debate at the moment about how you work with fixers and stringers, whether you give bylines, how you collaborate with them, how you work with them also when you are afar. So wherever I've been, I've also tried to meet with younger journalists because our roster of stringers is quite outdated now. And so to go back to an earlier question about what we can bring as young journalists or what you can bring as students to correspondence, you can really bring a knowledge of the country that they don't have. And so they always appreciate that. And so for me, it was the same thing. Whenever I go somewhere, I just try to meet the new, ambitious, great journalists in the country. So I get a better understanding of the country, and also potentially I can work with them.
A question for everyone. Could you tell us what your track at PSIA was, and also in hindsight, now that you've worked for some time, was it useful? I mean, no, do you? No, okay. How useful was it? Yeah, how useful was it? And no, but I mean, do you the knowledge that you got from PSIA, do you use it like in your everyday work? Sorry.
Okay, I'll start. So mine was international security, and the region I was focusing on was Russia and the former Soviet Union. And I was focusing on frozen countries in the former Soviet Union. So yeah, it was so useful because literally I graduated and all the frozen conflicts were just not frozen anymore. So I just, you know, the Donbass, Karabakh, like now even other stuff might happen in Georgia. So it's actually super useful because I could, like, it's not like I had, you know, huge expertise, but still I could say to the newsrooms, like, you know, I have studied this actually. I'm just not some journalist who moved here, and I know about this, like I know the theoretical stuff. So that was useful to get jobs, but also literally on the ground, it was so useful because history is related to all those events. And so having studied that and having very practical courses about the geopolitics, once you are in Karabakh and there's the war again, and you know all the background of what happened before and why it was frozen, it was definitely useful. You know so much more if you've studied that for 2 years at PSIA than if you did not. So it is very useful. And then again, also to market yourself as a journalist covering this region in particular, it is very useful to say, to have that on your resume, I have studied this region. I mean, I know it's very niche what I'm talking about, but it was useful because of that, because not a lot of people know about Abkhazia, Ossetia, Transnistria, and all those.
Yeah, and also I wanted to add that I think it's super important, the joint degree for like sources and the sources that you get. And for example, at Le Monde right now, I cover a lot of international stories, and that has helped me like so many times that even if at PSIA I did international security with a focus on the Middle East, which is a region that I don't cover a lot, but no matter what, it depends on for example, I have a contact at the international affairs, like a ministry, or like at the Quai d'Orsay, or even like in the intelligence community, because your teachers at PSIA are also like from those circles. So that has helped me, like, honestly, like countless times. But I reached out to like former teachers, and then if they don't have the information directly, they sometimes put you in touch with their colleagues or their former colleagues, and that has been like a huge help. That I mean, I didn't expect it that it would be so useful, even like 5 years, almost 6 years after that. Every month, almost every month, I use like a source that I had from like a class at PSIA.
I think adding to that, I absolutely agree with both of you. But for me, I think what's been the most useful were the fellow PSIA students that I studied with. So because at PSIA, you have people from literally all over the world. I remember before I went to Madagascar for the first time, for example, I hadn't been there before, and just reaching out to the PSIA group and see who's from Madagascar, who can I have a call with, who can tell me about the country and the latest trends and what I need to know, and who can put me in touch with others, was really, really useful. And generally also, like, your fellow PSIA classmates move on to some really interesting jobs, and they work in really interesting organizations, and they are often on the ground all over the world. So if you need story ideas, if you need just like a first point of contact whenever you come somewhere new. I mean, now a couple of years after graduation, I'm not using it as much anymore, but especially at the beginning, I was really using the PSIA student network a lot.
And just to add on that too, I'm actually using them so much right now. And for those who were at Sciences Po before, or if you have friends at Sciences Po who are at PSIA or not only at PSIA, yeah, use them. You may not see them now, but like so I graduated 6 years ago. Yeah, so they are in embassies now. They are the Quai d'Orsay. They are the speechwriters at the Élysée. They are in the ministries. For COVID, during COVID, it was so helpful in France when they were like in those like cellules de crise and stuff. Professors too, definitely. PhD students, think about the assistant de prof, because now they are the professors. Yeah, I wish I had networked a bit more at PSIA, and like not rush to my next J-School class, and maybe stayed a little bit with the PSIA students and the professors, because they're great. And in France, in Europe, but also, yeah, beyond, definitely.
Maybe just to follow up, along with the expertise
from PSIA and the network, which is not only using people, but I think the keyword was networking. Is there something you learned from G-School and the Joint Master that still helps you today, concretely, when you're reporting?
Something else.
Maybe I can start. I think the one thing that's really helped me, A, get my job, and B, like do my job on a daily basis, is that at J-School, we really learned how to do everything. So I think that applies if you're freelance, but also if you're staff, and if you work for places like the BBC. Like whenever we go do a story, we're expected to cover the same story for TV, for radio, for online. So you need all of the skills that you learn in J-School, like all of them. You need to know how to mix a radio package. You need to know how to edit a video. You need to know how to shoot. You need to know how to take good stills. You need to know how to write. So if this is something you're interested in, like just being able to get this multimedia training and learning all of it has helped me massively over the last couple of years. And I guess if you're freelance like Astrig, it's really valuable as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said.
So this one's for you. You said that first when you got to Haut-Karabakh, you like no one was interested in the region anymore. Then they all called you back. So what did you do in between? Did you stay there? And
I did stay there. So in the meantime, because I was having a hard time finding some work, I started working with a local investigative outlet, which is one of the like 2 serious media outlets that exist in Armenia. So I started working with them, which was actually also quite great and very useful. It was the first time I was working in Armenian and there, and it helped me also find sources and things that helped me later on when I started working for foreign outlets. But I will be completely transparent with you. I also had to teach French and work and do other stuff because I just couldn't leave, you know, just with that job. And I wasn't sure that they were gonna call me back, all those media, but at the same time, actually I was deep down because I know the region very well. And I just knew that after a war, there is a political crisis. Like something was gonna happen. It couldn't not happen, but it was really hard. And I kind of wanted to leave sometimes. So, but just trust yourself. You know, when you know a region and you feel like something is gonna happen, I think you should try to stay and trust your instinct. And so that's why then when there was the military coup attempt, they called me back. And then it was really easy to get jobs, and I stayed for one.
And I think this is a very basic question, but how hard it is to live on your own in countries that where there might be conflicts, and I mean, how do you keep it in the moral state and your psychological state? How do you keep up with that?
I wish I had the answer. I don't know. I mean. In Armenia, it was different for me, harder and easier at the same time because I am Armenian and I have family there, so I had that circle, but also it made everything more complicated because obviously the war was also affecting them. And I think it's harder to cover a country where you have personal, you know, attaches to. But, you know, you will get in touch with other foreign journalists. That can be one group of people you hang out with. I mean, that's what I do a lot in Ukraine, I mean, especially at the beginning. And then if it's a country, I don't know, you will have fixers. And actually, a lot of time you end up kind of becoming friends with them. And then they introduce you to people. You can find the French, if you're French, like expat community. Not always great, but still, you know. Just so basically, you will be able to find different circles. But it is, I mean, I have to be honest, it is extremely hard. And I think it's not necessarily for everyone to do it. And also be honest with yourself because you're going to burn out. I think you burn out much more quickly when you're a freelancer because you don't have a support system. So it's not just the conflict, like it's the whole war stuff, and then you have to do your work, and then you have to run after the editors and people so that they pay you because they forgot to pay you even though you did the cover page story or 6 months ago. So, you know, it's just all that is a lot. And I think you just have to be honest with yourself, reach out to organizations that can help you. I mean, I can share a few links or something after, but the Rory Peck Trust or you know, the International Women Media Organization, all that, they offer for freelancers support for mental health, for security trainings, for all those things. And I think it's just really important to know about it and try to reach out to them. And when it's too much, just leave. It's okay. You will have another story. You can have FOMO, but you will actually find something else to do after. And that's what I did after a year in Armenia because it was too much for me. And then I went to Ukraine, but you know, now it's fine.
About mental health, there's a question that makes sense for one of you.
Yeah, if I can add something on this. I've found it so useful to have friends who are not journalists. My best friend is a journalist, but it's also great to have friends who are not journalists because it's so easy to get obsessed with what we do, especially if we cover conflicts or if we're abroad for work. But they help, at least my friends who are not journalists, and my friend who are journalists, they also help me, but they help me just like put things into perspective and realize that if I've missed a deadline or if my first draft is not as amazing as I wish it was, it's not the end of the world. Like, no one gives a shit. Yeah, that's my main piece of advice. It helped me a lot during the pandemic, actually. Yeah.
I think what Astrig just said about knowing when to stop is really important. Like, I also was quite involved in Ukraine, and you kind of have the feeling like you want to keep going back and you need to like stay on the story and everything. But at some point, I just noticed for myself that it was getting too much. And also in general, not just reporting on conflict, but if you're in a job where where your job becomes a life, basically, like we travel almost every week, and I've been doing that for 3 years, and you don't really have much of a life outside of work. You also need to figure out at some point for yourself whether this is what you want, or whether how much it's worth the toll on your mental health. And like Elian said, for me, what has really helped me is I live in a big house with 5 flatmates and I love it because none of them are journalists and they all care about completely different things. And whenever I come home from a trip, I'm so like in my head with everything that I've worked on, and I'm just so stuck in my thoughts. And then I come home and I see that people just talk about normal things and normal life, and that's really helped me to come back to reality much faster than if I had been on my own, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's what Astrig said about like how it's harder when you're a freelancer. I think it's an important point because, I mean, yeah, from like all these years freelancing, I remember how much time you spend to like asking to be paid or like these kind of things, and I think it's really important to just like think about what your boundaries are and where you set them, because I mean, that's something that I struggled a lot with, like to be able to say no to some stuff, and like a magazine, because even if they're nice with you, like they know that you're a freelancer, they know that you need the money to pay your rent. So like sometimes they're gonna be like, oh, actually, would you like go tomorrow? You need to leave at 4 a.m. and then like go on a report that you need to file in like 2 days. It's 6 pages. Are you done with it? And sometimes like I mean, I remember like putting myself in really like stressful and then like bad situations where I felt overstressed and burnt out because and then regretted that I didn't say no. And I think it's something that like it's not because you say no that they won't after offer you like other jobs to do or other articles, and like they will, if they're happy with your job, they will send you like IDs anyway or ask you to collaborate on stuff. But just like I think it's important to be careful on that part, and it's okay to say no sometimes.
Maybe one last question.
I guess I was just wondering, for freelancers, how did you introduce yourselves to media and how did you approach them? Because like, for example, you worked for a lot of different medias. Like, how did you get in touch with them?
I think I had like 3 main different ways. So the first one, as I said, and really I meant it, stay in touch, all of you, and with the teachers, because that's the first thing I did, is I wrote, and even in the groups of alumni and stuff from the school, really at the beginning I would just write like, hey, I'm going there, let your newsrooms know that I'm there if they need anything. And it worked. I mean, I work a lot for Radio Télévision Suisse, and it's actually Nadej, a former student, who gave me that contact, which now they're really one of my main clients. So it was super useful. And then I actually passed that contact to another student later on, who's now a correspondent in Jerusalem. And so that would be really the first thing, is just ask your teachers, pitch to them, or ask them a contact in their news organization to pitch. And then the second thing is cold pitches. It can be super scary, it is, and a lot of times you don't get an answer, but actually a lot of times you also do. And I think I tried to cold pitch to The Guardian. I was pretty sure they would never answer, and then they did, and they wanted the story. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, now I have to actually do this. Like, I didn't think about it. But don't be scared to just try to cold pitch, even if you don't know anyone in the organization, even if you just try, it might work. And then the third thing, when you're on the ground, you will meet other journalists. And a lot of times, especially if it's like, a foreign country, they actually look for people to replace them when they go abroad or when they take a holiday, or just when, for example, in Ukraine, it's just too much for them. Most of the correspondents just have way too much work. So they sometimes, when they trust you and, you know, if they see your work and they like it and they're like, okay, you know what, would you like to do this thing instead of me, and things like that. So it can help you. That's how I got into France 24, for example, because I met Gulliver Crack, their correspondent, who was literally burning out. And then he saw me and he was like, hey, do this. And I did. And then, you know, it just works like this. And actually a fourth thing that was quite useful for me is festivals. I've been to, for example, the Perugia International Journalism Festival, or to Visa pour l'Image, if you do photography. And I met a lot of people there, which at the beginning I thought, okay, it's useless, they already forgot about me. But again, a few months after, I suddenly get contacted by like Getty Images, and they're like, oh, you were that Armenian girl, right? We want something there. And then, you know, so just try everything. You never know what is going to be useful.
Maybe one last question. Do you know about your next professional steps, and how do you envision your life professionally? Are you like forever with New York Times, Le Monde, or is it something that's able to evolve in your head? Like, I don't know where I'll be in 6 months or in 2 years. Okay, I know this is recorded. My question was weird, but no. But how do you envision like your professional life?
It took me 6 years to get a sort of stable, permanent position. So I've been here for a while. But no, I'm super relieved and happy that I finally can have something like a stable job. I got a bit tired of these years of freelancing, but I don't know. I mean, so right now I'm super happy with the job, because what I do is like most of the stories I work on, like 90% at least, is what I pitch. So it's like, and I do only long forms. I can take as much time as I want on stories or investigations. I travel like almost every month. So I mean, I would like to stay there. So, but how it works like now, so I'm going to sign this CD in the next few weeks, and then I'm going to stay at the magazine for at least 5 years. That's what's specified in the contract. So, but then like Le Monde is a big, it's like a big newspaper, so you can easily move from one section to another. What we do also, and I like that a lot, is that, like, for example, being at the magazine, I work with over sections. So I did an investigation on Auchan with the OSINT video investigation team. So we do some cross sections work like that. And so I would like to go on this direction. But then, yeah, I'm like, honestly, like reporting on the ground, doing long form is sort of my dream job. So I'm happy to do that. So I mean, honestly, I would like to stay at Le Monde. That's I hope it's gonna go well like that.
Congratulations on the long-term contract.
But you made some podcast as well, and other kind of journalism inside the magazine Le Monde. That was my question. So yeah.
Okay. You mean over formats or over?
Yeah, but that was my question, like widely. So. And Luca, Elian, will you see yourself, for example, in Dakar for like 10 years, or how does it work for you?
Not 10 years, but a few years, hopefully. Usually those correspondent postings are last 3 to 5 years, I would say. And it's been a year for now. So, and I also just love the region that I'm covering. So I'm not really thinking about what will come next, also just because I love my life in Dakar. But yeah, I guess the question is, would I want to, do I try to move on to another correspondent posting with the New York Times? Do I stay in the region and work for someone else? Yeah, I think in our generation, or I'll just talk for myself, but I speak for myself. I feel like I have quite a few friends who are also correspondents who are starting to wonder whether they just want to jump from like one position to another and be correspondents, you know, in various countries and regions for 15, 20 years, not really thinking about the impact that this can have on their personal, or on our personal life or family life and so on. So if you have a partner, what do they do? Are you the one who follows? Are they the one who follow? So that's where I'm at in terms of like reflection and what I want to do next year.
Sira?
I actually quit my job last week, so I'm going freelance. Funny that you asked this question. No, it's been a dream of mine for ever since I was in journalism school. I wanted to work as a freelancer, but honestly, I was feeling quite burned out, to be honest, when I left journalism school, and I kind of thought having a staff job puts some boundaries on how much you do, which turned out to be a lot. So that plan didn't really work. But no, I want to step away from news as my main thing that I work on in the BBC. It's often you react to news, and I want to work on more long form projects on TV and radio documentaries. I want to focus on a different region, and I'm leaving next month. Even though I have a permanent contract, I could stay for as long as I want. I could move within the BBC, but at the moment for me, this is a new adventure that I'm super excited to go on.
You look happy with your decision.
Yeah, I am.
Well, I don't really know what I'm doing because I'm a freelancer, right? So I just keep on, I follow the news, I go back to the regions that I cover, there's so much happening now. But actually on the long term, I would also see myself doing longer form documentaries, and I'm also doing more and more documentary photography. So, you know, slowly I'm trying to make that transition, meeting with production companies and trying to pitch documentaries and not just like TV packages and news pieces. So hopefully that's what I'll do.
Thank you so much to all of you, you four. Thank you from Dakar, Les Alpes, Brussels, and for Astrig coming to journalism school. Thank you so much to all of you.
Questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.